Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Kid Icarus. In the last part, we started off World 2 after ending off World 1. And now we're gonna go through the third stage here, which is probably the hardest one in World 2 rather. Just because it's, I think, the longest. Now, something I haven't gone over yet that's a bit of an abuse of mechanics in the game. You can have upwards of 2 arrows on screen at a time, but usually they have a pretty standard rate of fire. There is a way around that, though. If you shoot an arrow, duck, and then unduck and shoot again, you can shoot another one pretty quickly. However, again, you can only have 2 on screen at a time, so that's not gonna help you too much. For the most part, that's also only useful in the normal stages, not so much in the fortresses, just due to the fact of how big the rooms are there. Though, speaking of fortresses, in between parts, I was curious about the speed run for Kid Icarus, so I took a look at it, and not just like the usual, I took a look at the speedrun.com page to see what the world record is. I actively watched the world record for this one. As of this recording, it is a 2152 by Fruit Bat Salad, set 5 days ago, which is why I'm mentioning exactly how long ago it was set, because that is very recent. And for the most part, it was what I expected. A lot of movement, refinements, and such, keeping ahead of the screen, so on and so forth. Managing the amount of enemies you kill in certain stages so that you don't have a long score tally at the end of most of the stages and get only the needed health extensions. The thing I found the most curious, though, and interesting was in a lot of the fortress stages, and a lot of the stages here on the overworld as well. Oh, it seems that there was a specific movement pattern with ducking where, particularly it seems to be on left walls, where you can clip through walls on the left and the Pac-Man syndrome from the vertical structured stages will kick in, where you'll just pop it on the right. And they use that to skip through a lot of stage and fortresses. For instance, there's barely a single stage in that game, in the speedrun, that's over 2 minutes long. They've really broken this game in pieces. And time for our third and final sacred training. Overall, this is probably the sacred training I recommend the least, just due to the fact I don't think the item's the most useful in the world. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's useful, but this is one of those you either get first or last, essentially, is the way I'd like to put it. Because the range extension is just useful because it keeps you alive longer, the fire just makes you kill enemies more quickly. This third one is the only one that is purely defensive. And because of that is either just not suited to a playstyle from the start, or is, therefore, take your pick. What we just got is the Crystal Rod. When you eventually activate it by maxing out your health at a certain level, it causes Pit to be surrounded by 2 crystals that are constantly revolving around him, and if enemies touch them, they take damage. I think the damage is equal to the strength of your current arrows, which is why I say either you pick it first or you pick it last, because early on that's only doing 1 damage, and while that might be good for stunning enemies or killing certain ones around you, for other things it's just not as useful. Personally speaking, I just prefer to have it at a higher level because later game enemies, I do believe, have more HP anyway. I think. This is one of those games where I can't quite tell if a lot of enemies just go down in one shot and the strength upgrade is for mostly the fortresses, or if later game enemies do have more HP but the higher attack just makes it feel like they still only have 1. The only enemies I'm entirely certain about HP are ones that I kill with 1 hit from the start, like the snakes and, say, the weird single mono eye things, or boss fights. Another thing I noticed that the speedrun did, which I found somewhat interesting, is, in particular, at the end of the second fortress coming up here in a few minutes, they die after killing the boss to lava that's in the room. And what's interesting is they die the moment the stage clears, so they clear the stage with 0 health. And what's interesting about that is, when they eventually take damage in the next stage from a damage tile, it causes their health to wrap back around to max. Which I find that interesting from a programming perspective. Also, I should mention, damage tiles in this game, like I mentioned earlier, they're not exactly immediate. However, I think it also depends on where you are relative to their hitbox. Like the vines we've seen throughout this stage, those are damage tiles. However, I notice I get hit a lot more quickly by them than I do the lava, for instance. Also, watch out, more Plutons. I forgot they were in this stage, actually. Plutons have a weird thing I noticed in the speedrun as well, where, like some other NES games, when an enemy is damaged, their hitbox and hurtbox aren't active. So if you're getting too close to a Pluton, advisable strategy is to just shoot them and hope you can clip through them through that method. Also, I don't think I mentioned it yet, but whenever you leave a door, it closes. So when it comes to shops in particular, make sure you got everything you want out of a place immediately. Now, it's around this point in the game where I'm going to start being a bit more conservative with my hearts and spending them, even though I've been fairly conservative with that to begin with. Because we're, at this point, I think we're over halfway through the game, so I want to be a bit more careful about how I use them. I'm already doing fairly good on endurance, and rather HP and strength, but I just want to make sure I'm good on other things as well. I mentioned it earlier, but the game is one of those games that gets easier as you go through it, and part of that is just because, first off, the second world's easier because you don't have the concentrated bottomless pit beneath you. But also just because your strength upgrades are really notable in this game. For instance, look, I have, like, what, 6 levels in, I already have, like, over twice the amount of health I had to start. 4 times, even. It's ridiculous just how much more powerful you get throughout the game. And yet, how at the same time, still easily vulnerable you are, just because you can take hits really quickly. Alright, I believe one room in particular in the speedrun where they do the left wall clip is in the next room to my right. However, I'm going through the path that they want you to take, so I'm just gonna do that. Also, you probably have noticed it by now, but be careful in fortresses whenever you see the little pots, like the one above to my right now. That will spawn 4 of the snake enemies at any given time. However, a quirk is that only one of them can be spawning the enemies at a time. And I think you have to kill a certain wave in order for the next wave to spawn. So use that to your advantage when it comes to navigating areas. Now, as for special locations in this particular fortress, the map in particular is right near the start. You want to head down instead of to the right like I did to grab that, and you can just head right back up afterwards. And that's also the direction you want to go to if you want to find the hospital. To get to the hospital, you want to head down as far as you can from the start, and then head all the way left. Thankfully, that is in a pretty good location, all things considered, because that's relatively close to some eggplant wizards. It's also a pathway you can take to get to the hot springs. But I'm taking a different path to get there. Again, hot springs generally along the way to the boss fight. I will say, I think the fortress levels are probably my favorite levels in the game just because they have a bit more going on to them. I wish you were able to keep your power-ups from the main stages, but I understand why, because especially the range extender would be absolutely busted in this place. You also are going to start seeing these spike traps from here on out in these stages. They are a bit tricky with their hitbox, in that it's not one-to-one the spike, but not in the way that aids you, like the hitbox is shorter than the spike. I mean, the hitbox actually extends a bit further out than the spike, because it's like a frame ahead of its animation or something, I want to say. Or at least that's what it feels like. And that can be kind of deceptive because of that. Now, our goal, overall, to find the boss fight in this section is to get towards the bottom right of the map. However, this map is, I want to say, at least 1.5 times the size of the first fortress. It's big. So you're going to want to be careful with that. I will say, because I think the map is a total of... first of all, I should clarify. I mean the total potential size of a fortress map, not the overall size, is, I believe, an 8x8 grid of rooms, so 64 rooms total. I think this one's close to 50, so you're going to have a lot of rooms moving forward. The final fortress, in particular, is absolutely huge. However, you both do and don't have to go through a lot of the rooms, because the pathways for the second and third fortress in particular get kind of twist and turny in terms of finding your way to the boss fight, but the amount of rooms you need to go through isn't as high as that would seem. This here is a secondary hospital, so if you got eggplants in a few rooms ago, you can actually just rush through a few rooms to get to there. Again, though, you might want to consider whether that's worth your life. This is a room in which I believe they do the clip in the speedrun. So, yeah, as I mentioned, that's a potential pretty good skip there. I want to say to get to that room normally, or at least from the left, you head down from the start and then you head all the way right. So you skip a good 75% of the fortress doing that. I would recommend the chalice if you're below half health at this point, by the way, because there's only one hot springs in this dungeon, and that was the one all the way back towards the top left of the map. So, at this point, the chalice would be more worth it than the hot springs. Come on, grab on. There we go. Grabbing onto the ladders is a bit tricky as well. Like, it's not hard, but it's a bit specific as to when you have to hold up, where you will grab onto it, so on and so forth. So that could be a potential problem in some rooms where there might be damage below you. They also like to make some one-way ladders as well, from previous room floors into ceilings. So you might want to keep an eye out for that. Either way, boss of this, I believe, is Hudron, whatever. It's essentially Volvagia. This is probably the hardest boss in the game just because of how specific you have to be to hit it. You have to hit it on its head. Or even, I think maybe when the mouth's open. And that is pretty specific to do. The health is also massively increased from 100 to 200. So you have a lot more HP to get through, even if your strength is doubled at this point from the first fortress. And he just loves to eat through my Centurions. The speedrun in particular in this fight is very good because they like to stay close up and personal and they can get like 3 shots off every jump. This is probably my least favorite boss in the game though, just because hard to hit, you lose your Centurion, so you lose potential damage out pretty quickly. And even though I think the hitbox on this guy is overall fairly forgiving, I want to say the tail might not even count as a hitbox, but don't quote me on that. Just the amount of range you're given and how hard it is to hit makes this a pain in the ass. Which again, another reason it's basically Volvagia. I hate Volvagia in Zelda 2 due to that. Overall, the second fortress is much longer than the first one, but in some regards I think it's easier. Just due to the fact that you have higher health and attack at this point. Overall, World 2 on the whole as well is basically that. It's technically harder, but it's also easier because we are more prepared and there's no bottomless pits. And that's the end of that world. Which means now we're on to the third world in the game, Skyworld, our home. Because that's where Medusa is, of course. Also, yeah, I forgot to mention, the third health power-up was at 100,000 health points, rather. And they're really kind, because they give you a hot springs right at the beginning of this stage, which I will take. And it also means we're going to get to see our crystal rod in action. And there we go. Now, this isn't an impenetrable shield. An enemy can get through it very easily, especially if they just worm between the two crystals. However, due to their rotating speed, it's very hard to get hit through them, I suppose is the way I want to phrase it. Their enemies are going to have a harder time doing touch damage to you and not getting taken out by it as well. Now, Skyworld, of course, is the opposite of the Underworld, so they're having us do the exact same stuff as the Underworld, climb up. However, I find this place still easier than the Underworld, just because, again, you have more power to you at this point in the game. But also just because I think the platforming is a bit more forgiving, just given the wideness of some platforms. At least in the early stages of it. Some, like the third stage in particular I'm thinking about, has some annoying platforming that I like to do some things around. And this can be kind of specific. However, at this point in the game, you probably have at least 1 or 2 angel feathers, so you don't need to fear too much about falling to your death. Which I guess is another reason that the Underworld feels harder, because even though there's constant bottomless pits beneath you there, it's the same here, but since you have angel feathers at this point, you can just do this. I don't know why I didn't choose to fly up above everything there, because I usually love doing that. I guess I just didn't feel like breaking this level. These weird little jellyfish things above me, those are damage tiles, so you want to be careful of that. And that's an angel feather in use there. As you can see, it got me some good vertical height. In particular, if you're really good about using them, you can, like, skip over half a stage if you have enough of them. These things are Pluton flies. They are still Plutons, they just fly at you now. So watch out, don't get your items stolen. However, as you saw, you can abuse the edge of the screen there to make sure they don't touch you. Also, not gonna lie, while I like this game's soundtrack overall, Skyworld theme's kind of weak. Alright, now right here is potentially the most important thing I do in this entire stage. First off, I've been careful about my skill level through here because now we can get the final strength power up. And now instead of a brownish red, we are, oh god, we're blue again. However, I don't find this blue as bad because at least we're on a black background. However, at this point, I'm also going to be doing some farming here. I am going to be destroying the little plant enemy you saw sprout out there. That is, I believe, a honer, something along those lines. They spawn up every couple of seconds and fire immediately. However, I want to farm them for two things. One, I want to get to max hearts, 999. That shouldn't take too long. However, what will take some time is, just because I'm a bit nervous about my score at this point, I grind to over 20,000 points around here. This takes me probably close to 20 minutes. And it takes a while, but trust me, I'm just doing it to be safe. In fact, honestly, I probably could have not done that and still gotten the score I want to have by the end of the game, which is over 200,000. But still, I wanted to be careful. But with that, I'm going to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 4, we're actually going to go end off the game. See you guys then.